There's an audio recording. It exists right now. You can find it online if you want to. It is 45 minutes long. And in those 45 minutes, you can hear over 900 people die. You can hear Jim Jones talking. Calm, almost gentle. You can hear people crying. You can hear children screaming. You can hear a woman begging for the lives of the kids. And then slowly, one by one, the crowd goes quiet until there is nothing left. 918 people, gone in one night. And the most terrifying part is not how they died. It is how easily they trusted the man who killed them. His name was James Warren Jones. Born May 13th, 1931 in Crete, Indiana. Small town, poor family, strange kid. Neighbors remembered him holding funerals for dead animals when he was barely old enough to go to school, preaching to anyone who would listen. From the very beginning, Jim Jones understood one thing better than almost anyone alive. He understood what people were afraid of. In 1955, he founded a small church in Indianapolis called the People's Temple. And he did something nobody else in Indiana was doing at the time. He welcomed black and white people into the same room, sat them next to each other, fed them, cared for them. In 1950s America, that was radical. That was dangerous. And for thousands of people who had never felt like they belonged anywhere, it felt like home. That is how it always starts, with something that feels like home. By the 1960s, Jones had moved his congregation to California, San Francisco. The church was growing fast. Thousands of members. Politicians showed up to his services. Newspapers praised him. He was feeding the homeless, running drug rehabilitation programs, building schools. From the outside, People's Temple looked like exactly what America needed. From the inside, it was something else entirely. Former members who left described a man who was changing, slowly at first, then faster. Jones started claiming he was the reincarnation of Jesus, then Buddha, then Lenin. He told his followers he could heal cancer with his bare hands. He staged fake healings, planting sick people in the crowd, having them stand up and walk. He told his congregation that nuclear war was coming, and that only he could protect them. He started controlling everything. Members had to hand over their passports, their bank accounts, their property. Letters to family members outside the church were read and censored. Anyone who questioned Jones publicly was brought before the entire congregation and humiliated, beaten sometimes. And if you tried to leave, Jones told his followers that the outside world would destroy them, that the government was watching, that enemies were everywhere, that the only safe place on earth was inside the People's Temple. By the mid-1970s, people were starting to ask questions from the outside. Journalists, family members of people trapped inside. And Jones knew it was only a matter of time before someone came looking. So in 1977, he did something that should have terrified everyone who heard about it. He moved 1,000 of his followers to the middle of a jungle. The place was called Jonestown, a compound carved out of rainforest in Guyana, South America. Jones had leased over 3,800 acres from the Guyanese government. He told his followers it was paradise. No racism, no poverty, no government control, a utopia. What they found when they arrived was something else. The food was not enough. The housing was not enough. The work was brutal. Clearing jungle, farming in brutal heat, building structures in a place where everything was designed to keep people in rather than make them comfortable. Followers who had given up their homes, their savings, their entire lives back in America found themselves trapped in a jungle with no passport, no money, and no way out. And Jones was getting worse. By 1978, he was barely sleeping, injecting drugs daily. His speeches, broadcast over loudspeakers throughout the compound at all hours of the day and night, had become long paranoid rants. He talked about death constantly, about enemies closing in, about the need for what he called revolutionary suicide. He had begun running drills. In the middle of the night, guards would sound an alarm. Everyone in the compound, men, women, children, would be marched to a central pavilion. Jones would give a speech, and then he would tell them it was time. Cups would be passed around. Everyone would drink. Then Jones would tell them it was just a test, that the drink was harmless. He called these drills white nights. He ran them over and over, training 900 people to drink on command. In November 1978, a United States congressman named Leo Ryan flew to Guyana. Ryan was from California. He had been hearing from families back home. Desperate people whose mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers had disappeared into Jonestown and stopped making contact. He wanted to see it for himself. On November 17th, Ryan arrived at a compound with a group of journalists and aides. Jones tried to make it look normal. There was music. People smiled for the cameras. Jones sat down for interviews and seemed almost charming. But that night something happened. Several members of the compound quietly passed notes to Ryan's delegation, handwritten, begging to be taken out. The next morning, November 18th, 1978, Ryan gathered those who wanted to leave and prepared to take them to the airstrip. 15 defectors. He thought the visit had gone reasonably well, all things considered. He was wrong. As Ryan's group reached the airstrip, a truck pulled up. Armed men climbed out, members of Jones' personal security force. They opened fire. Congressman Leo Ryan was shot and killed on the runway. 3 journalists died beside him. 1 defector was killed. Others were shot and wounded and survived by lying still among the bodies, pretending to be dead. Back in Jonestown gym, Jones gathered his 900 followers in the central pavilion, and he told them the time had come. What happened next was recorded. The tape runs 45 minutes. Investigators found it after. The FBI labeled it Q042. It is known simply as the death tape. Jones spoke first. He told his followers that Ryan was dead, that the authorities were coming, that there was no way out. He said they had one option left. Then the vats were brought out. Flavor Aid, a cheap fruit punch drink, mixed with cyanide, Valium, and other sedatives. Nurses carried it to the children first. Syringes were used for the babies. The poison was squirted directly into their mouths. You can hear them on the tape. You can hear them crying. And then you cannot hear them anymore. There's a woman on the tape named Christine Miller. She stood up in front of everyone, in front of Jones, in front of the guards with guns. And she argued. She said they did not have to do this. She said there were other options. She said the children deserved a chance. Jones talked over her. Calmly, the crowd shouted her down. She kept arguing. Alone, for several minutes she stood there and fought for 900 lives with nothing but her voice. She lost. The cups were passed. People drank. Those who refused were held down and injected by force. Guards with guns stood at every exit. Jones kept talking through all of it. His voice on the tape gets quieter as the crowd thins. More and more silence. Less and less movement. Near the end, he says, "Take our life from us. We laid it down. We got tired. We didn't commit suicide. We committed an act of revolutionary suicide, protesting the conditions of an inhumane world." Then the tape ends. When investigators arrived the next morning, they found 918 bodies spread across the compound, many face down in the grass, arms around each other, parents holding children. The largest loss of American civilian life in a single event in history until September 11th, 2001. Jim Jones was found with a single gunshot wound to his head. Whether he pulled the trigger himself, nobody knows for certain. Tracy Parks was 12 years old when it happened. She survived because her father grabbed her and screamed at her to run. She ran into the jungle while bodies fell around her. She said, "I felt like I wasn't in my body. We were so scared we just kept running." She ran until she could not hear the screaming anymore. The thing that stays with me about Jonestown is not the poison. It is not even the children. It is Christine Miller. One person stood up in that pavilion and said no, surrounded by guards with guns, surrounded by 900 people who had already made their decision. She stood up and she fought, and nobody joined her. That is what Jim Jones really built in that jungle. Not a church, not a utopia. He built a place where 900 people have forgotten how to say no. Some things are more dangerous than any weapon. The ability to make people stop thinking for themselves. Stay safe out there. On the morning of June 10th, 1912, a woman named Mary Peckham walked next door to check on her neighbors. She had not seen them all morning. The curtains were still drawn. The livestock had not been fed. Nobody had come out. She knocked on the door. No answer. She tried the handle. The door was locked from the inside. She went and got her brother. He climbed through a window. What he found inside that house has never been explained, and the person who did it has never been caught. The house was at 508 East 2nd Street in Villisca, Iowa, a small, quiet town of about 2,500 people. The kind of place where nobody locked their doors, where neighbors looked out for each other, where nothing ever happened. The Moore family lived there. Josiah Moore was 43 years old, a respected businessman. His wife, Sarah, was 39. They had 4 children, Herman, age 11, Mary Catherine, age 10, Arthur, age 7, Paul, age 5. That night, 2 other children were staying over. Sisters, Lena and Ina Stillinger, ages 12 and 8. 8 people went to sleep in that house on the night of June 9th, 1912. None of them woke up. When Mary Peckham's brother went through that window, he found the house completely still, completely dark, every curtain drawn, every mirror in the house covered with clothing. He went upstairs. He opened the first bedroom door. He found Josiah and Sarah Moore, both dead in their bed, both struck repeatedly with an axe while they slept. The axe was found in the room, leaning against the wall. Whoever used it had wiped it down but not taken it. The children were in the next room, all 4 of them in their beds, all killed the same way. And downstairs in the guest room, Lena and Ina Stillinger, the 2 sisters who had simply been invited for a sleepover. 8 people, all killed with the same axe, all while they slept. The entire town of Villisca woke up that morning and realized something that nobody could fully process. Someone had walked into that house in the night, moved through every room in total silence without waking a single person, killed 8 human beings one by one, and then walked back out into the dark. And nobody heard a thing. Investigators found a few things inside the house that told a partial story that made everything worse. The killer had not rushed. There was evidence they had stayed in the house for hours after the murders. Food had been moved in the kitchen. A cigarette was found. The killer had sat in that house in the dark, surrounded by 8 bodies, and simply waited. For what? Nobody knows. Every single mirror and reflective surface in the house had been covered. Deliberately, carefully, the clothing used to cover them was arranged neatly. The ceiling above each bed showed gouge marks from the backswing of the axe, meaning the killer had stood over each sleeping person, looked at them, raised the axe above their head, and swung. In complete darkness, in complete silence, 8 times, the Stillinger girls showed something different from the others. Lena, the older sister, had defensive wounds on her hands. She had woken up. She had seen what was happening. She had tried to fight. She did not survive. There was also evidence suggesting that after killing the family, the killer had returned to a room where Lena Stillinger lay and spent time there. I will leave what that implies unsaid. The investigation was a disaster from the start. The sheriff was not experienced with anything like this. Within hours of the discovery, hundreds of townspeople walked through the house, touched things, moved things. By the time any proper investigation began, the crime scene was essentially destroyed. Over the years, multiple suspects were investigated. A traveling serial killer named Henry Lee Moore, no relation to the family, who had committed similar axe murders in other states. He was convicted of killing his own mother and grandmother, but never charged with Villisca. A local man named Reverend Lynn George Kelly, a traveling preacher who had attended the same church event as the Moore family the night of the murders. He confessed twice. He retracted both confessions. He was tried twice. Both trials ended without conviction. And then there was a name whispered around Villisca for decades. A local businessman. Someone who knew the Moore family. Someone with a possible motive. That name was never officially connected to the case. The murders of Josiah Moore, Sarah Moore, Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, Paul, Lena, and Ina were never solved. The case was officially closed. The house at 508 East 2nd Street still stands. You can visit it. People do. It is now a museum. You can book overnight stays. People who have stayed there report things. Sounds in the night. The feeling of being watched. Children crying when there are no children. Doors that were left open found closed in the morning. One overnight guest reported waking up to find every mirror in the house covered. They had not been covered when the guests went to sleep. Nobody else was in the building. There are 8 names that should never be forgotten. Josiah, Sarah, Herman, Mary Catherine, Arthur, Paul, Lena, Ina. They went to sleep on a warm summer night in Iowa in 1912, in a safe town, in a locked house, surrounded by people who loved them, and someone came anyway. The door was locked from the inside when Mary Peckham knocked that morning. To this day, nobody has been able to explain how the killer got out. Stay safe out there, and lock your doors tonight. This one is different from the others. I am not going to tell you this is confirmed. I am not going to tell you there's a body or a crime scene or a court record. What I am going to tell you is that thousands of people across the United States and Europe have reported the same experience, independently, without knowing each other, describing the same details. And every single one of them says the same thing about how it felt. Wrong. Deeply, deeply wrong. Like every instinct in their body was screaming at them to get away. This is the story of the black-eyed children. The first documented report came from a journalist named Brian Bethel in Abilene, Texas in 1996. Bethel was sitting in his car in a parking lot late at night, writing a check. He said 2 boys approached his car, somewhere between 10 and 14 years old. They knocked on his window. He rolled it down slightly. The boys said they wanted a ride home. They said they had no money and needed help. They were calm, overly calm. Their speech was strange, formal in a way children do not normally speak, like someone doing an impression of how a child talks. Bethel said something was wrong immediately. He could not explain it, just a feeling, a physical sensation of dread that he had never experienced before. His hands started shaking. His heart started pounding. Every part of him said, "Do not open that door." He looked at their faces. Their eyes were completely black. No white, no iris, no pupil visible. Just solid black from edge to edge. The boys kept asking to be let in. Their tone shifted. More insistent, almost aggressive. One of them said, "We cannot enter without your permission." Bethel drove away. He said he was shaking so badly he could barely steer. He published his account online. And something unexpected happened. Hundreds of people responded from across America, from the UK, from Germany, from Australia, all saying, "That happened to me too." The accounts follow patterns. Consistent patterns across thousands of reports from people who had never read each other's stories. The children always appear in pairs, almost always 2, sometimes 3, rarely alone. They always appear at night or in low light, at front doors, at car windows, at the windows of houses. They always ask to be let in. They say they need help. They need to use a phone. They need a ride. They are hungry. They are lost. And they always say some version of the same thing. "Please let us in," or "You have to invite us inside." Witnesses consistently describe the same physical response. Not just fear, something deeper than fear. A full-body reaction, nausea, paralysis, an overwhelming instinct to run that the person cannot fully explain rationally. And then the eyes, always the eyes, solid black, no reflection, no light behind them, People who have seen them say it is not like looking at a person. It is like looking at something wearing a person. A woman in rural England in 2012 reported 2 children knocking on her front door at 2 a.m. She looked through the peephole. 2 kids, maybe 10 years old, standing completely still in the rain. She called out and asked what they wanted. They said they were cold and needed to come inside. She said she felt immediately sick. She said it was like the temperature in my hallway dropped 10 degrees the moment they started talking. She did not open the door. She watched through the peephole as they stood there for 40 minutes without moving, without speaking, in the rain, completely still. Then they were gone. She checked the security footage the next day. The cameras showed the children arriving, standing at the door, and then, frame by frame, there was no moment where they walked away. One frame they were there. The next frame they were not. A man in Portland, Oregon in 2014 reported something worse. He said he made the mistake of opening the door. He heard knocking late at night. He assumed it was a neighbor. He opened the door without checking first. 2 children, pale, expressionless, completely still. He said before he even processed what he was seeing, his body went into full panic. He said, "Every hair on my body stood up. My vision went blurry at the edges. I could not speak." One of the children looked up at him. He saw the eyes. He slammed the door, locked it, backed away into his living room. He said he could hear them on the other side of the door, not knocking, not speaking, just standing there. He could hear them breathing. He called a friend, stayed on the phone for an hour. When he finally looked through the peephole, they were gone. He said 3 days later, he became seriously ill, high fever, vivid nightmares, a feeling of being watched constantly that lasted for weeks. He moved out of that apartment 2 months later. He said he never slept comfortably there again. Nobody knows what the black-eyed children are. Some people think they are demons, something that needs permission to enter, like the old folklore about vampires not being able to cross a threshold uninvited. Some think they are a collective hallucination, a modern urban legend that spreads and grows as more people hear about it. Some researchers point out that the accounts are too consistent to dismiss. Too many details match across too many countries with too many people who had never heard of each other. What nobody can explain is the reaction, that physical full-body dread, that feeling of wrongness that every single witness describes before they even see the eyes. Something that reaches past rational thought straight into the part of the brain that knows when something is hunting you. Whatever these things are, whatever they want, there seems to be one rule that had protected every person who followed it. Do not let them in. Do not open the door. I don't know if these things are real. I genuinely don't. But I know this. If you ever hear a knock at your door late at night and something in your gut tells you not to open it, listen to that feeling. Because every single person in these accounts who trusted their instincts walked away fine. And the one guy who opened the door, he is still not okay. Stay safe out there, guys. And I will see you in the next one.